Emerging Threats Hub. The Nuclear Gambit.
Hello, and welcome to Emerging Threats Hub. I'm your host, Sébastien. What if I told you that the rules governing the most destructive weapons on Earth, rules that have held through immense pressure for more than 25 years, are on the verge of being shattered, not by an adversary, but by a deliberate policy choice from within the West? This isn't a hypothetical. It's the shocking possibility emerging from recent reports that the United States is preparing to resume nuclear weapons testing. It is a potential earthquake under the entire foundation of global non-proliferation, a system designed to prevent the very scenario it now seems to be inviting. But this nuclear gambit isn't an isolated event. It's the loudest, most dangerous note in a much larger, much more chaotic symphony. A symphony of transactional diplomacy, failing peace models, and a fundamental rethinking of what conflict even looks like in the 21st century. Today on the podcast, we will decode this new global landscape. We'll start with that nuclear shockwave and trace its ripple effects across an anxious Europe and a war-torn Ukraine. We'll examine why our old models for keeping the peace are failing, from the UN to Gaza. Then, we'll dive into the Pentagon's new Playbook for Irregular Warfare and unpack the great debate over whether conflict with China is structurally inevitable. Finally, we'll see how Europe is scrambling to build its own shield, and why the most important battles are now being fought not with tanks, but with narratives. This is Emerging Threats Hub.
The Opening Shockwave.
Let's begin with the story that cuts through all the noise. The report that President Trump has ordered preparations for a resumption of U.S. nuclear weapons testing. For context, the United States hasn't conducted a nuclear test since 1992. A self-imposed moratorium, a global norm, has been in place ever since, a cornerstone of the non-proliferation treaty that has, for all its flaws, prevented a widespread nuclear arms race. Breaking this norm would be more than a policy tweak. It would be a declaration that the era of arms control is over. So, the immediate question is why? Analysts suggest two primary drivers. First, the message. Resuming testing sends an unmistakable signal to Russia and China that the U.S. is willing to match their own nuclear modernization programs aggressively. It's a form of high-stakes signaling, demonstrating resolve in a language of pure power. The second driver is about the weapons themselves. The U.S. needs to certify that its aging nuclear arsenal remains safe and reliable without explosive testing. A new test would provide definitive data, but it would also open the door for Russia and China, whose own testing moratoria are less transparent, to do the same. It shatters the, well, we don't do it, so they don't have to logic that has, however precariously, maintained a balance. The implications are staggering. It could trigger a multi-billion-dollar, multi-decade arms race across all three nuclear powers. It would deal a devastating blow to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, giving countries like Iran or North Korea a ready-made excuse to advance their own programs. Is this a necessary, if terrifying, step to maintain deterrence? Or is it a reckless, politically motivated act that undermines the very security it claims to protect? That is the debate that will define our immediate future.
The America First ripple effect.
That nuclear gambit doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's the loudest signal in a broader, more chaotic shift in American foreign policy, one rooted in a deeply transactional worldview, and the tremors are being felt acutely on the front lines of global security. Nowhere is this clearer than in Ukraine. Reports indicate that a push for a quick deal to end the war has led to Ukraine being denied critical, long-range weapon systems it desperately needs. This isn't just a diplomatic disagreement, it's a fundamental shift from a strategy of ensuring Ukraine's victory to one that prioritizes a rapid and potentially unfavorable settlement. It leaves President Zelensky, and by extension the entire European security project, in a profoundly uncertain position. The message to allies is clear. American support is no longer a given, but a transaction to be negotiated. This uncertainty creates bizarre and dangerous contradictions on the ground. Consider two stories that emerged within days of each other. First, Estonia confirms it's working with the US to maintain or even increase the American troop presence on its border with Russia, a crucial signal of reassurance to NATO's eastern flank. But at the same time, we learned that the US is planning to cut troop numbers in Romania, another key NATO partner on the Black Sea. So, which is it? Are American forces staying or going? For the planners in Tallinn and Bucharest, this isn't an academic question. This is the definition of an unpredictable and volatile ally. Adversaries in Moscow and Beijing are watching this intently, learning that the once reliable framework of American commitment is now subject to the whims of political negotiation. This is the America First ripple effect in action. It shows predictability and forces every nation to question the very foundation of its security strategy.
The failure of old models.
While great powers maneuver, the human cost of this new disorder is most visible in places where our old models for peace have failed. Two stark examples from this past week illustrate this perfectly. The first is the shadow of October 7th. A detailed analysis of that horrific attack revealed a catastrophic failure in the peacekeeping model designed to prevent it. The United Nations forces in the area had a mandate, but it was fundamentally mismatched to the modern asymmetric threat posed by Hamas. It was a model built for a different era of conflict, one that assumed clear front lines and state actors. It proved tragically ineffective at detecting and stopping a complex non-state assault. This forces a global reckoning. Are our international peace operations fit for purpose in a world of hybrid warfare and insurgent terror? The second example comes from Gaza, in the context of a proposed eternal peace. While the ambition is noble, the analysis is sobering. There is no quick fix here. The idea that a single leader can broker a permanent peace between Israelis and Palestinians in one masterstroke ignores the deep-seated historical, political, and human realities on the ground. Disarming Hamas, for instance, isn't just a military problem. It's a political one that requires a regional coalition and a long-term vision for governance and security that simply does not exist yet. Both of these cases, from the UN's ineffectiveness to the intractability of Gaza, show us the same hard truth. Our old tools for building and maintaining peace are breaking. We cannot simply apply outdated solutions to the complex human tragedies of today. A solution-oriented approach demands that we first acknowledge the failure of the models we have.
The Pentagon's new playbook.
So, if old models are failing, how are the institutions responsible for our security adapting? Inside the Pentagon, a quiet but profound doctrinal shift is underway. The U.S. Department of Defense has just published a new formal instruction, known as DoDI 3000.07, that officially codifies its approach to irregular warfare.
What does that mean?
In simple terms, it's the institutional recognition that the biggest threats are not just from other state armies, but from the gray zone, from paramilitaries, proxies, cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, and political coercion. It's about winning conflicts that happen below the threshold of outright conventional war. This new playbook is a direct response to the failures we just discussed. It's an attempt to build a military capable of meeting the threats of October 7th and the complexities of great power competition. And it's forcing a rethink within the military's most elite units. For years, many have argued that U.S. Special Forces were suffering from an identity crisis, being used for traditional direct action missions kicking down doors, when their real strength lies in their ability to work with partner forces, understand local politics, and conduct the very kind of irregular warfare this new doctrine prioritizes. This new instruction could be the moment of realignment. It's the Pentagon finally writing on paper what it has learned from 2 decades of conflict. It's a pivot from just winning battles to strategically shaping environments, a necessary adaptation to a world where the line between war and peace is increasingly blurred.
The great power competition is here.
All of these adaptations, nuclear posturing, transactional alliances, the new Irregular Warfare playbook, are driven by one overriding reality: the strategic competition between the United States and China. But as intense and potentially catastrophic competition between these two powers actually inevitable? This week, two compelling arguments emerged, presenting starkly different worldviews. The first, encapsulated in an article titled "Structure Trump's Agency in the U.S.-China Relationship," is a classic realist perspective. It argues that the global system is anarchic, and when a rising power like China meets an established power like the United States, conflict is structurally baked into the cake. It doesn't matter who the leaders are or what they want. The pressure of geography, economics, and security dilemmas makes a competitive, if not confrontational, outcome almost certain. It's the Thucydides trap in action. The second argument, from a piece titled "America and China Can Have a Normal Relationship," offers a powerful counterpoint. It posits that structure is not destiny. It argues that with skilled diplomacy, clear communication, and a focus on managing competition, rather than seeking to win it, the two nations can coexist. It suggests that both countries have far more to lose from outright conflict than they have to gain from it, and that rational self-interest can and should prevail. Which view is correct? The truth, as is so often the case, likely lies in a messy middle. The structural pressures are real and immense, but so is the human agency to choose a different path. Understanding this debate is crucial because the lens through which policymakers in Washington and Beijing view this relationship will more than anything else determine the trajectory of the 21st century.
Europe's scramble for autonomy.
Faced with this great power competition and an unpredictable United States, Europe is scrambling to secure its own future. The era of taking transatlantic security for granted is emphatically over. The most visible symbol of this scramble is the race to build a European air shield, spurred by the reality of Russian missiles raining down on Ukraine. European nations are urgently trying to piece together a multi-layered air and missile defense system. The goal is to create a protective umbrella over the continent, an insurance policy against further aggression. But the question on many analysts' minds is whether this is substantive progress or just bureaucratic hot air. The project faces immense political hurdles, industrial competition between nations, and a staggering price tag at a time of economic uncertainty. But the scramble goes beyond just missiles. The European Space Agency has just approved a €1 billion plan to pivot towards military satellite capabilities. Space, long a domain of civilian and scientific cooperation, is now formally being recognized as a warfighting domain by Europe. From the air shield to the high frontier of space, these are the tangible actions of a continent forced to grow up fast. They are building the independent defense capabilities they long assumed the United States would provide. Whether they can build them fast enough and with enough political unity to make them credible is one of the defining security questions of our time.
The narrative wars.
And so we arrive at our final and perhaps most important theme. Underpinning every story we've discussed today, from nuclear weapons to European air defenses, is a new central battlefield: the narrative. One analysis calls this the military narrational complex. The idea is that in today's world, power isn't just exercised with weapons, but with stories. The message behind a potential nuclear test, the story of American reliability, the propaganda of a new Russian tank, even the great debate over the US-China relationship, is a fight over which narrative will win: inevitable conflict or managed coexistence. We saw a tiny, almost comical example of this in a promotional video for Russia's new BMP-T Terminator tank. The video was meant to project intimidating strength, but sharp-eyed observers noticed the main gun was visibly shaking, undermining the very message of power it was trying to send. It's a perfect microcosm of the conflict between narrative and reality. Governments, militaries, and non-state actors are all investing immense resources in shaping what you see, what you believe, and how you interpret events. Understanding this is now a critical survival skill. The fight over information, over perception, over the very story of global events is no longer a sideshow. It is the main show. Discerning truth in this environment is the first and most vital step toward building any kind of stable and peaceful future. So, What do we make of the nuclear gambit and the new global face-off it represents? We are living through a period of profound strategic volatility. The old, predictable patterns of the post-Cold War era are gone, replaced by a world of transactional power, new forms of conflict, and a relentless battle over the very story of what is happening. The return of nuclear testing, the wavering of alliances, the failure of peacekeeping models, these are not isolated incidents, but interconnected symptoms of this great transition. To be clear, this analysis is not meant to inspire cynicism or fear. On the contrary, it is a call for clarity. Understanding these complex and dangerous shifts, connecting the dots between a Pentagon directive and a policy in Estonia, is the only way we can begin to architect a path towards stability. It's about seeing the problems for what they are, so that we can demand the solutions we need. That is the mission of Emerging Threats Hub, to provide the clarity you need to navigate a complex world, and to explore the pathways, however narrow, toward a more just and peaceful future. Thank you for listening.